Good morning, everyone. I'm Kalle Videnoja, working for Finnish National Board of Research Integrity, here presenting also Prepared project that is developing ethics and integrity guideline for research conducted in times of crisis. And the Prepared project is in its final year, so the fact finding's been done and even the guidelines are quite finished, and now we are working on more practical how-to guidelines and so on. Okay, for the context, it seems that trust in science is in relatively good shape in Europe, but as Agatha said, like having trust in science doesn't equal to making decisions which are based on research. And here I'm more or less focusing on this like small minority, or perhaps we can say quite not even that small minority, but at least quite a vocal minority of people who have only little trust in science, or who feel that the science overly influences politics, and it's something like about 10% of people. Next slide, please. And first, there's this term infodemic, which was coined by WHO, and this means that there's abundance of information times of disease outbreak, and it means there's too much information, and it's both like accurate information and inaccurate information, even misinformation and even disinformation, which is like perhaps the most relevant thing on my presentation. Next slide, please. There are already things that are emphasized, for example, in the European Code of Conduct, about things that the scientific community can do, and the first thing is, of course, to communicate research in transparent, fair, full, and unbiased way. This means communicating also the uncertainties relating to the research work. That is quite important, because during the COVID-19 pandemic, there was quite a lot of hurry to get results out, and sometimes the findings weren't communicated that well, and that caused some policy decisions that were going from this direction to another one, and so too much fluctuation there. Next slide, please. And I hope I'm not repeating too much what Leonidas has already said about research integrity's role in strengthening the trust in science, but basically what I want to say is that research integrity has lots of consequences. Some of these are economical consequences, and these are probably the consequences that we have been mostly focused on, like because they harm. There are financial costs, there are social costs for researchers who are involved in these like research misconduct processes, but to put it like I would like to emphasize that they harm also the validity and trustworthiness of research, and of course they can like not only compromise reliability of research, but they also may skew like research results in a more systematic way within particular discipline, and this is basically we are talking about replication crises and some high profile cases like the Stapel case, some of you might know. But as we could go on and have the next slide, please, because I would like to emphasize the more broader view of this. And this is something that has come up in the fact-finding period of Prepared quite well, and it is that resilience is built in time of peace, or relative peace, or ease, or whatever, but beyond avoiding misconduct, research integrity community and research organizations also should focus on building ethical work environments. We can see it so often on our tables when there comes some sort of accusations of misconduct. Usually there are failures in communication and work culture that precede those actual violations, and would be most important now to build organizations and build structures that that are resilient in the times of crisis. And next slide, please. And basically, this is something that I'm most eager to tell you about. We have also identified one risk. This is not only on times of crisis, but like all things, like current issues tend to accelerate in times of crisis. And I'm talking about harassment that researchers face. And harassment can take many forms. It can include attempts to silence researchers, and usually the aim is to silence those researchers, but there can be many ways to do that. It can be inappropriate criticism or personal attacks and hate campaigns, and we are talking that about a bit later. And this is something that I think Panagiotti's findings can be mixed quite well. Next slide, please. And because we can see that digital networks and social media have amplified harassment, and what happens is people in echo chambers, they find each other, and there's like targeting campaigns, and it's like very harmful, and it is kind of a harassment. And when we are talking about mistrust in science, and if we say that there's a 10% of people who consider science to be flawed, and there's a smaller minority still who have like anti-scientific attitudes, and this is probably the group that is mostly responsible of this kind of harassment and attempts to silence researchers. Also, we can find that women, non-binary individuals, and sexual minorities are disproportionately targeted, and it's not only researchers, but also we can see that also, for example, research funding organizations get targeted as well when they want research on say gender studies, and you can see it that on X Twitter also, that these kinds of organizations get targeted and attacked as well. Next slide, please. And his harassment, as I said, can take many forms. There can be like weaponized lawsuits, weaponized authorities, and of course public insults, and this gets also amplified through social media. So these threats, they transform into harassment campaigns, and and all the actors in the life cycle of research are more or less endangered in this process, because it can extend to organizations as well. And next slide, please. And here are some possible countermeasures. And now we must say that this is also a question that is being addressed. For example, in the European Code of Conduct, it says that research institutions and research organizations should protect actively researchers who are receiving threats, and there's national legislation already on place who mandates that the organizations should protect their employees, but still national legislation should be updated or reviewed so it can address this problem. And then there's also national level networking, and in Finland we are trying to build this kind of a network. I believe in Germany there is already this kind of a network at place, and then we must also work internationally, have players such as UNESCO and European Union, and probably NRIO could be a place for that, and NI, European Network for Academic Integrity. These are issues that range through all the organizations, through the whole life cycle of research and all the organizations involved. So this is like quite multifaceted issue. Here are some references, and thank you. This is from me. Please do be in touch if you have any further comments or things you would like to discuss with me, and probably we can move onwards.